of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Law Enforcement for its examination of the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission Annual Report 2024-25. I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. These are public proceedings being video streamed live via the Parliament's website, and Hansard transcript is being made. I remind all witnesses that in giving evidence to the committee, they are protected by parliamentary privilege. It is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and such action may be treated by the Parliament as contempt. It is also contempt to give false or misleading evidence. Witnesses also have a right to request to be heard in camera. The Parliament has resolved that an officer of the Department of the Commonwealth or of a state shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked of the officers to superior officers or to a minister. This resolution does not preclude questions asking for explanations of policies or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. If a witness objects to answering a question, they should state the ground upon which the objection is made, and the committee will determine whether it will insist on an answer, having regard to the ground which is claimed. If the committee determines to insist on an answer, a witness may request that the answer be given in camera. The Commonwealth officers appearing today are also reminded of the Senate order specifying the process by which a claim of public interest immunity should be raised. A copy of the order is available from the Secretariat. I remind parliamentarians of their obligations under the Behaviour Code of the Australian Parliamentarians to treat witnesses with dignity, courtesy, fairness and respect. I now welcome officials of the Australian Criminal Intelligence, and I understand on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to the Parliamentary Committee has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, would you please each state your full names and capacity in which you appear today? And
Heather Cook, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission.
Welcome.
Angela Barrett, Deputy CEO and Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you.
Jeremy Johnson, Executive Director, Policing, Information and Checking Services.
Thank you.
Matthew Rippon, Deputy CEO, Intelligence.
Nicole Mayo, Chief Counsel and Executive Director, Legal and Assurance.
Heidi Madden, Executive Director, Intelligence and Information Systems Division.
Thank you all, and thank you for appearing before us today. Ms Cook, would you like to make an opening statement?
I would, Chair, if I could have the committee's indulgence. I'll make a brief statement.
Thank you.
Thank you again for the opportunity. I'm pleased to be here before the committee for the examination of the ACIC's 2024-2025 annual report. The ACIC is Australia's National Criminal Intelligence Commission, with a focus on the transnational and serious organised crime threat environment and its impact on Australia. Serious and organised crime is an enduring and pervasive national security threat. It endangers our communities, erodes our economy, and undermines the integrity of our borders and institutions. According to the Australian Institute of Criminology, it's a threat that costs Australia more than $82 billion annually, which is more than the national defence budget, and represents funding that could otherwise support essential services like education, healthcare, and emergency response. While the scale of harm is significant, Australians can be assured that our agencies are committed, capable, and united in the fight. The ACIC works closely with a range of partners to strengthen and inform the national response to this threat. We focus on identifying and understanding new criminal entities and methodologies, and play a critical role in coordinating national efforts to inform disruption of these threats, regardless of their origin. We also support community safety by providing more than 76,000 frontline officers with access to national policing information systems, as well as by sharing thousands of intelligence reports and undertaking millions of background checks per year. Our annual report is a vital tool for accountability and transparency. It assures the government and the community that the ACIC maintains robust governance and performance standards and complies with legislative requirements. It also provides the opportunity to highlight the ACIC's performance and achievements. I won't provide commentary on our results against each performance criteria, but will instead highlight some key achievements during the 2024-2025 reporting period. In response to the independent review of the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission and associated Commonwealth law enforcement arrangements, and the need to ensure we are agile and efficient in countering the threat posed by serious and organised crime, the ACIC commenced implementing a new intelligence operating model. This reform has helped inform the strategic prioritisation, resource realignment, and development of a future sustainable funding model to equip the ACIC to effectively deliver on its mission. In 2024-25, we streamlined our performance framework to better align with our 3 key activities. This involved reducing the number of our performance criteria from 13 to 3, and reducing our performance measures from 32 to 11. In the reporting period, the ACIC fully met 2 performance criteria and substantially met 1, and it fully met 9 of our 11 performance measures and substantially met the other 2. In 2024-25, the ACIC generated 2,002 new products and disseminated our intelligence products 12,500 times to 291 separate agencies. Our results for 2024-25 also show that the national policing information systems continue to perform strongly, delivering a reliable and effective service for our partners and supporting diverse policing tasks and community safety. In 24-25, our National Police Checking Service processed over 7.26 million police checks, the highest volume since it was established. We also delivered the National Automated Fingerprint Identification System, Next-Gen capability, replacing the legacy system with a more advanced search engine and features that support fingerprint and palm print matching. This critical tool, used thousands of times daily by policing agencies across Australia, strengthened frontline identification of suspects in a range of crimes, reinforcing criminal justice responses and improving investigative outcomes. The ACIC also continues to expand the National Criminal Intelligence System, which is now accessible to over 52,000 frontline enforcement officers. The ACIC continued to lead in anticipating emerging criminal threats through scientific innovation, including our National Wastewater Drug Monitoring Program. In 24-25, this capability detected the presence of the synthetic opioids nitazines and xylazine in the Australian market, providing early intelligence that informed public health and law enforcement responses and supported the strengthening of legislative controls on synthetic opioids and precursors. The ACIC also produced a strategic assessment on the threat posed by serious and organised crimes exploitation of Australia's international supply chain. The assessment identified key risk points across maritime routes and Pacific staging hubs, guiding coordinated whole-of-government action to strengthen and protect these critical nodes. This is an area where we continue to work closely with our partners to close vulnerabilities and harden the environment against criminal exploitation. While we appear today in relation to the 2024-25 reporting period, looking forward, the ACIC continues to deliver a number of more recent government priorities. Following the tragic events of the 14 December events at Bondi, we're contributing to the response through our role in providing criminal intelligence assessments for the new firearm background checking framework. We're also accelerating delivery of the Commonwealth components of the National Firearm Register to ensure that, as jurisdictions become ready, they are able to integrate the registers as a matter of priority. In November 2025, the government announced the ACIC will deliver the National Continuous Checking Capability, which will provide continuous near real-time monitoring of national changes to criminal history information on working with children check holders. The pilot capability is now adoption ready, and the ACIC continues to work closely with jurisdictions and partners as to their future onboarding. A key focus for the ACIC for 2026 will be to embed and strengthen our role as Australia's National Criminal Intelligence Agency, one that is attuned to the complexity of the threat environment and driven by the need for sharper, faster, and more actionable intelligence. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Would you table your opening comments for us? That'd be good. Very helpful. Thank you. Thank you very much. And In terms of reading the report and referring to your opening statement, the amount of work that is undertaken by ACIC is incredible and it's increasing. For the benefit of those that are following online and for the committee, can you tell us how many officers are working within ACIC, please?
So for the reporting period, we had 924 staff. We also have secondees, so 26 secondees and task force members from partner agencies embedded and working with us as well.
In relation to the National Firearm Register and your role in that, is that going to be implemented on time?
Pardon me, is it going to be implemented?
Implemented on time, and have you finished your work with that for the initial work that you were doing?
Yes, we've accelerated, as I mentioned in my opening statement, the Commonwealth components, so the components that the ACIC is responsible for delivering, and ABF has some role to play as well, and of course the Department of Home Affairs. So all of those components and the technical components that we're responsible for will be adoption ready by the end of December 2026.
Great. And in relation with working with children, your involvement there, can you outline to us what that work was?
Yep. I think I'll hand over to Angela, Dr. Angela Barrett, to talk that through.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator, for the question. So essentially, as you would be aware, at the moment, a Working with Children check is based on a National Police check that is point in time. So what we'll be doing as we build the national continuous checking capability is introducing a near real-time checking capability whereby those that have a Working with Children check will continuously be checked against offences in the system to allow for alerts to go through to the screening units in states and territories so that they can be aware if there's a change in the person's offence history. As of December last year, we are adoption ready with the pilot. The pilot closes the gap on Commonwealth offences that weren't previously available within the system. So as the screening units onboard to the pilot, they will be getting new information already that's not currently available to them, and we'll continue to build the system over the coming years. But Jeremy, I don't know if you want to provide any different detail?
I think that's the NCCC capability, so the continuous checking capability, is initially aimed at working with children checks and the NDIS workers, but it's being built in a way that we can expand that out to other use cases into the future.
So it could be used as well within aged care?
Certainly. Yep.
Great, thank you.
There's many.
I just have a couple of questions before I hand over to my colleagues. The Sonic Act will transfer the oversight from the Ombudsman to the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security. Can you outline to us whether or not the Commonwealth Ombudsman will retain any functions relating to ACIC?
Once the Sonic legislation or the bill is in effect, we will not fall under the Commonwealth Ombudsman's purview anymore.
Can you explain to us what the change actually means, going, as I said, from the Ombudsman to the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security? What will the changes be and how it relates to ACIC?
I believe the mandate of the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security is somewhat broader. I think they're already able, for the agencies that they already oversight, including us, they look at certain aspects of our operation already. But they're able to inquire into, a full range of our activity. Really look at whatever we're doing. The Ombudsman's functions were more confined to particular operation of particular powers and authorities. So I think one difference will be probably a broader remit for the Office of the Eye, just to inquire into more aspects of our operations.
Great, thank you, Mr. Bates.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Chair. Where was it going to first? So in your performance measures and results, you mentioned there about reducing criteria down from 13 to 3 and your number of measures from 32 to 11. Will that reduction in performance criteria and measures make it difficult to be able to compare results going back from years gone to this year and years forward?
Yeah. Yes, in fact, it will make it difficult to compare, but I think it was quite important that, and the criteria has shifted already in previous years as well. But I think what we're looking to do is settle on an appropriate balance of measures that truly allow us to measure performance, which is within our control and our power to do. I think with settling the measures going forward, we'll be able to get that continuity and trend analysis working. But you're quite right. I mean, for the moment, we're in that period where measuring a little bit apples and oranges. I think the broad measures and the broad criteria that we're measuring ourselves against do not change. I mean, our functions and the utility of the criminal intelligence work that we do to our stakeholders, our operation of the national policing information systems, their availability and operation, and our criminal history checking function. So those things don't change. We're just trying to refine the criteria that we measure our performance by to make sure it's a more valid test.
Wonderful. I've got a couple more if you're happy. Yes. Then you also mentioned about one of your case studies on the drug testing, and you mentioned xylazine and nitazenes.
Nitazenes, yes.
And in the report it mentions that I think it was nitazenes have been banned, but xylazines haven't been. Is there any reason why, when there was more xylazines found than nitazenes, why we haven't done that?
Yeah. For xylazines, and I'll hand over to Mr. Rippon in a moment, but there is no commercial or legitimate use of nitazenes, which is why it's an easier substance to ban, including the precursors that make up that, whereas there is some use of xylazines in the commercial space. And so banning is a more complicated process.
We do work, as you'd expect, very closely with the Attorney General's Department and with the Home Affairs Department as we're seeing the market evolve, and we're seeing new elements of synthetic opioids appear in wastewater and appear from our intelligence holdings and our engagements with state and territory partners, and in fact law enforcement and Five Eyes partners. So we almost acting like an early warning system for the community and the country with our partners here in Australia. Working closely with the Attorney General Department and Home Affairs Department is really important because it allows us to try and front run what we might need to do in terms of adapting the schedules for controlled substances. And there is a fair bit of work that goes into that and a fair bit of science that goes into that. And we've been successful on a number of fronts with a range of controlled substances to have them named as such and allow partner agencies to then take more substantive action when they are seizing things at the border, for example, through ABF or the AFP.
Wonderful. And I have a follow-up from the Chair's question about the National Firearms Register that you mentioned, Mr Cook. You said about some of the projects being accelerated. Have you received any additional funding since what happened in December to help with that acceleration, and also with the now announcement of a national gun buyback? Is there any further implications on the register, or putting that register together with that as well?
In terms of funding for the NFR, there's no additional funding. We've been able to reorganise. Well, we've been able to reorganise the program within the existing funding envelope in order to, as I said, accelerate the Commonwealth components. So the funding envelope has not changed for that, but that doesn't cause us any particular problem. And you mentioned the gun buyback scheme. I think that's still a bit of a work in progress. Yep. So obviously the NFR will play an important part, but the NFR is a federation of existing systems which are already available and being used by jurisdictions to help identify firearm owners and licensing information and information about the firearms themselves. So those databases already exist. The National Firearm Register is about bringing those together, making them available in real time, and really modernizing and digitizing the system at that national level, which is really about the jurisdictions, managing their components of it as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rapacoli.
Thank you, Chair. How are we all? And thank you for the great work that you guys always do in your teams in keeping us safe. I have a question about to go on with the drugs one earlier that was spoken about. Are you guys doing any work in the prescription drug space of them coming into the country? And mainly I'm asking around testosterone and a few other things, because testosterone is being used hugely amongst young men and men in this country and aren't being prescribed. Mm-hmm. It's coming in. Are you guys doing any work in that space?
I would say I don't think we're aware of, acknowledge that it's certainly an issue. We haven't seen, I'll get Matt to clarify this, but I don't believe we've seen any evidence of serious organised crime involvement in the importation or circulation of those drugs, but I'll stand to be corrected. But that would be the link that where we are engaged as an agency is where we see organised criminality driving a particular illicit market.
Again, Mr. Rapacoli, nice to see you. No, we're not seeing it manifest itself through serious and organised crime lens yet. Yeah. Organised crime, as you know, adaptable and agile, and they will go towards the market that they see that they can make the most profit without having much regard at all for the health of young men and women of the country. So, again, working with partners, really important to, almost provide that early warning system as we're seeing trends change in the market, but not as yet.
Are you seeing any other prescription drugs around the place at the moment where the criminal, where those industries are involved?
Not at scale and not to the point where we are concerned to the point to provide more resourcing towards those. So not at this point in time.
All right, thank you. And the National Automated Fingerprint Identification System that holds over 7 million fingerprints, what has that done to be able to enable police and other officials to be able to have access to that so quickly now?
Yeah, I think I'll hand over to Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, CEO. So the National Automated Fingerprint Identification System is effectively the only fingerprint database available to states and territories. They don't keep individual ones because obviously people move around the country. So the upgrade that we recently completed both modernised the technology that it sat on. So it used to be a sort of siloed system that they had a swivel chair here and there. The new one operates in their native desktop in the state and territory systems. Also introduced new algorithms which are a lot more accurate, and we can see that in the results and like the operational results as well as in testing. It introduced a number of other capabilities, including one that's effectively automates some of the processes. So instead of having forensic experts having to move files here and there and do all this sort of thing, the system basically, they just drop all the evidence into one file and it scoops them up, codes them, searches them, sends back results. So it's faster, more accurate, easier to use, frees up time for what are highly trained and relatively scarce resources for police agencies, so they can concentrate particularly that expertise on the more serious crime or the more difficult, that where the evidence is, the fingerprint, like the crime scene fingerprints aren't quite as good a quality as you might want, but that's all you got. You don't get to choose. So, we've got great feedback from states and territories on the effectiveness of that system.
That's great. This is a great example of the states and territories working together with the federal system as well. Will we see that happen in more things? We've got it in the National Vehicle Identification as well now. We're about to have it in the National Firearms Register as well. Will we see this come into more and more things that we can work with between the states and territories? Because we do know that it's a beautiful area to work in, and it's always a little bit different. Will we see more of this?
Certainly, almost all the policing systems we provide have a focus on national view of what is effectively state and territory information. So we have it in the DNA space, and we'll be doing some work going forward on the DNA database. As you mentioned, sex offender registers, even though there's 8 different ones, we house them all together, and that gives us the ability to, as is legally appropriate and allowed, because the states, the beauty of the design of our systems is that states and territories still are the sovereign owners of the data. So it's their data, they put them into the systems, and they decide based on different legislations. It's a wonderful federation who can see what for what purpose, and so all of our systems are designed to facilitate that basic principle, to preserve that sovereignty of data for states and territories, whilst also facilitating sharing as appropriate, because we know that political borders are kind of a little bit meaningless to criminals.
Thank you. And is there anything that we could be doing better to make sure this process is much more streamlined throughout the states and territories?
Look, it's an ongoing conversation. Obviously, there is a balance between sovereign state and territory governments and sort of harmonising legislation across the board. I think historically we saw that in the DNA space, where there was a model bill at the Commonwealth level, and that was sort of fairly radically changed as it went through state and territory parliaments, and that made the sharing matrices quite complex. That has sort of wound back over time, but it's a constant sort of balance between and we're seeing it in the firearms space right now. So obviously there's a national firearms agreement. We're not the policy owner of that, of course, but and it's generally a set of principles, but every state and territory is a little bit different. We're seeing, obviously for all sorts of reasons, New South Wales and now Tasmania moving ahead. WA was already there before.
I think it's safe to say that there's general acceptance nationally that information sharing, whether it's through these systems, whether it's through the National Criminal Intelligence System, that is an essential part of driving safety work and national security work. So I think that if there are barriers, they're not there for a reason. They're there to be overcome, and it does come down to needing to work through legislative policy angles. There's also a cost both to the Commonwealth and to jurisdictions in technically upgrading systems to remove some of the kinks and constraints that better enable sharing. But I think attitudinally and culturally, there is no barrier to the general understanding that data sharing is the future and the way to tackle crime and other national security threats.
And if I may, if you don't mind, CEO, I mean, the blue ribbon example here is the National Criminal Intelligence System. Yeah. A system that is now implemented and a live production system servicing all the states and territories through a partnership approach, through an approach where for the first time, and it took a long time to get this over the line, data sharing agreements across the nation were struck. And that's allowed the vehicle of the National Criminal Intelligence System to now thrive. So federation's always a challenge, but our relationships with the states and territories, both through that governance arrangement through the National Criminal Intelligence System and many others, is very strong. It's robust when it needs to be, but it's very strong, and we're very confident about the way the future looks as a consequence.
Good stuff. Thank you, Chair.
Just to follow up in terms of the National Register and now the buyback, it's good to see Tasmania is finally considering that Port Arthur was the catalyst of many of us campaigning for a national firearm register, and we ran the program, obviously, initiated by the former Liberal government, Mr Howard, in relation to handing in your firearms, and now my understanding is that there is, the fact that they're buying them back is very different to what it was 30 years ago. But I wanted to follow up on just one question before I go to Mr Abdul, and that is in relation to, you said you're looking at the DNA system. I was wondering if you could give us a brief outline of where you anticipate that new development is going to go.
Yeah, so the current system that we have was built in-house a number of years ago, I think it was 2012, 13, from memory. It's been upgraded, obviously, in the DNA science. There's been quite a lot of development over the last 20 years. And we have done some upgrades along the way to ensure that system provides the service it needs to state and territory, particularly forensic scientists. We have an expert panel that we work with of forensic scientists to ensure that as we plan for what that might look like in the future, it delivers what it needs. I'm fairly happy to say that from a scientific perspective, it's pretty good, and it's likely that the sorts of changes we'll be doing going forward go more to the usability for users rather than the actual science that sits behind it. It's pretty robust as it is now, but obviously it's an important part of police work now. It used to be kind of novel, and now it's sort of baked in and business as usual to do DNA.
Thank you. Mr. Abdul?
Thank you, everyone. I just have a couple of questions. First one is about what's required to actually go from point-in-time monitoring to real-time monitoring. I guess my question is, why hasn't that happened up until now, and what's actually technically required to make it happen?
Talking about the continuous checking for working with children checks?
For example, or your national police checks or whatever it is. So,
So we would need to do, and we are doing, upgrades to our technical systems to allow for that real-time checking. But Heidi Madden, do you have anything you'd like to add from a technical perspective on that?
Yeah, so I think partly we're dependent on the states and territories and their ability to wash through the data. We've got quite a number of underlying upgrades to our infrastructure to modernise to get through this process, but largely the foundations are in place.
Would that mean that it would be safe to assume that there's a lot of gaps in general in terms of real time on a number of qualifications across the board? I'm not being specific to a certain thing, but is it predominantly now, mostly now relying on point in time, and we're sort of moving towards real time?
That's correct. So they currently are point in time checks, which is, Jeremy will be able to fill in the gap, but that is why it is recommended that you have new police checks periodically. I can't remember the exact time frame, but you'll remember.
Yeah, so this is quite a complex space, but if we're talking working with children, those checks are currently continuously monitored at a state level in every state except the ACT, as it happens, but our pilot will fix that. And so the gap that we're looking to fill is at a national level. So offences committed in one jurisdiction not reported in another. To your earlier question, the issue about the difference between a point-in-time check and a continuously monitored check is, with a point-in-time check, we receive an application, we do the check, if they've got a record, we go to the policing partner that owns that record, determine based on spent convictions what can be released. In a working with children context, spent convictions don't apply on the whole, so that's pretty simple. But what we don't know as the ACIC is who actually got the working with children. We don't keep a list of who was successfully receiving a working with children card, because the police check is only one aspect of the test that they do. They do other things, medical records, all this sort of thing. So to move to continuous checking, we now have to know who are we checking, so effectively get a feedback from jurisdictions, from the decision maker about who was issued with whatever the the authority was, the Working with Children card or whatever, and then we have to know what we're checking them against, because if we were to report every single, drink driving charge to Working with Children check screening units, they would be absolutely inundated with offences that aren't relevant to the decision that they're making. So we've been doing a lot of work closely with them to, there's technically to get the back feed of who are we at. So we have a list of who we're actually checking, so who's got a card, and then which offences we're checking for. And so that's where some of the technical complexity comes in. In the meantime, as I said, there's state-based continuous monitoring, and there's also for broader checks, not just Working with Children, but this is why we always recommend that if an employer is seeking to do a police check, they don't accept one that's maybe older than about 3 months old, because a lot can happen. Obviously, if it's a year old, a lot can happen. But it depends on the risk profile of the position that you're going for.
Okay. And my second final question is around cyber. I know it's one of your priorities. Are you seeing, do you have research to share or something you can share about whether it's now on notice around how it's impacting sort of the medium-sized businesses, the impact of cybercrime? Do you do that, or are you just looking at offensive cybercrime?
We're again looking at where serious and organised crime is involved in using cyber as a vector to engage in criminality. So think, large-scale scam centres. Looking at the degree to which, digital currencies and whatnot are being used, for money laundering purposes and things. I don't have any stats to hand about victimisation of businesses, but what I could point you to is the Australian Institute of Criminology produces a range of research, including victimisation, cybercrime victimisation surveys and reports as well. But that would probably be where you could find the data around impact on businesses of all forms of cyber.
Would you say, I don't know if you're in a position to answer, so I'm actually trying to grapple with the question of, there's the enterprise level, which have sort of their infrastructure investment strategies to sort of mitigate cyber risk. What's happening at the level below that, across the supply chain? Yeah. Are we in a good spot? Is there a lot of work to do? Is there something that you can point us to that we can readily identify issues?
I don't have anything to point you to. Matt might have some thoughts on this, but I think it's safe to say that, again, the big end of town, as you say, invests heavily in cybersecurity and managing those sorts of risks. I think you could say lower into the commercial machinery or some of that supply chain, the sophistication and ability to invest probably diminishes. So I think it's safe to say, particularly where we're talking about supply chain risk, that the risk is greater in that space for cybercrime. But Matt, I'm not sure if you have any further to add.
Mr. Abdo, just to add to the CEO's commentary there, when it comes to business email compromise, ransomware, those sorts of big ticket threats that are coming from a cyber perspective, the Australian Signals Directorate and the Australian Cyber Security Centre are the lead on those matters. Where it intersects with serious and organised crime, absolutely the ACIC will be working hand in glove with our partner agencies in the national intelligence community to understand how that threat might be evolving or changing so that we can try and get in front of it at a lower level. So that's at that higher level. At the lower level, when we're talking about fraud and broader cyber-enabled fraud, mostly that's occurring from, as the CEO said, from places like Southeast Asia, where there are significant and evolving threats from scam centres at scale, industrial scam centres that are targeting Australians at all ages. That's where we would become more involved with partners such as the AFP and others, because we can see that there's a structured business model that serious and organised crime are focusing on. So a little bit of a differentiation there of where the roles might sit, but also how we interplay with each other and support each other in the ecosystem.
Sure. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Batten.
Thank you, Chair. Following up probably to Mr Johnson from Mr Abdo's earlier question, it got me thinking about the checks, like working for children checks, the complexities in that. So each state has their own laws, and then they also would have their own disqualifying offences, but each state to state are going to be a little bit different on what that law is and what their disqualifying offences are, and you've got to try and put all that together into a database. Is that how it works?
So first, yes, like many things in this context, that it's state-based and both criminal codes and spent conviction regimes and all that sort of thing. But we effectively what we do is we when we get an application, we look to see if that person, and it's a name-based check, so that has its own challenges, although we tune that algorithm quite well, and we also have a secondary sort of human look at it too. But we identify where that person might have a record, and then we send, if we think that that person is a person who has a record in a state and territory, we refer that name to them, and so we know all about the applicant, they know all about the person they've got in their files, and so confirm that it's the same person, look at what the offences are and what the purpose of the check is, whether it's working with children or a general employment check or an ASIC or an MSIC, there's lots of different purposes, and then apply spent convictions. And so effectively we release what that jurisdiction says is releasable under its regime. So it's complex. It gets more complex when people are known in multiple jurisdictions, because someone who has a spent conviction in one jurisdiction can have it unspent by a conviction in another jurisdiction. And there are some people out there who are known in every jurisdiction, so it gets interesting. But fortunately, and we rely heavily on our police partners. We deliver the police checking service in conjunction with them, and given the complexity, I think we do a very good job of accurately reporting based on the category and purpose, as we say, of the checks.
Very good. I have another one in relation to the surveillance devices report as part of the annual report, where the Ombudsman found there was, what's it say, not an insignificant risk the ACIC would not be able to adequately demonstrate they met necessary thresholds of challenge in court when using powers in all instances. Are you anyone able to unpack that concern from the Ombudsman and how you've addressed that?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you for the question. And we appreciated the Ombudsman's report on these use of these functions. I think very important to say at the outset, despite the wording of the recommendation, the Ombudsman found no unlawful conduct, or certainly didn't find that the ACIC was using its powers unlawfully. In unpacking that finding, it really went to I guess, more of our administrative purposes or processes around how we documented and recorded information, decision making, record keeping, and over the life of a project or an operation. Regular points of checking in around thresholds and documenting again how we were continuously and on an ongoing basis meeting the intention and the thresholds in the powers we were using. So I guess in simplest terms, the recommendations went to our record keeping, documenting of decision making, and those sort of administrative things. In response to that, we have done a fundamental body of work around that, around our systems, around our policies and procedures, around our templating key decision points, and a training of our decision makers throughout those processes. So over the past year, we've spent a lot of time, and this has been acknowledged by the Ombudsman as well, addressing those particular administrative and record-keeping concerns that the inspection revealed. So we're pretty confident we're in a much stronger place.
Well done. Chair, I do have to go. You know, I've got one other question.
Yes,
Can
go
I
for it.
ask it and then go and let me
Yes.
answer it? Just at the in the ACIC newsletter, it talked about the federal court dismissing a case against a liquidator due to a lack of definition of illegal Phoenix activity. Has that been addressed as to what Phoenix activity is now? So it's
Good question.
Sure
Which
that one.
report are you, is that a case study in the annual report? Or is it?
publication of the ACIC. What does it say? So through one of your December 2024 newsletter, explained. So it was in 2023. Sorry, the federal court dismissed an Australian Securities Investments Commission case against the liquidator due to a lack of definition of illegal Phoenix activity.
Oh, it's ASIC. That's a different agency.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I don't think it's an ACIC.
Different ACI, yeah.
It's the it's the ASIC. Yeah, different agency.
There you go. Well, my apologies. You can't answer that one. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Right, and I will leave. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Senator Sharma, you've just arrived, so I've got a couple more questions, if you like, and then I can come to you. And I wanted to, where was it? I wanted to go back. There was a few I wanted to. So in relation to the changes around the new Sonic Act and legislation, what's the status of the replacement of the ACIC establishing legislation? And can you outline to us what that's actually going to mean?
So, in response to the independent review that was conducted and landed in 2024, so it's not necessarily attached to the Sonic bill, but there was a recommendation in that government-endorsed review to repeal and replace the ACIC or the ACC Act, the Australian Crime Commission Act, which is the framework that the ACIC operates under. Following the endorsement of that recommendation, we've been working with the Department of Home Affairs and Office of Parliamentary Counsel in shaping and informing the drafting of that legislation. It is in draft form now, so excellent progress made, and obviously it will be a matter for government about when that piece of legislation is introduced, but it is basically provides a framework for the ACIC commensurate with the findings of the independent review commissioned by the government, which recommended that the ACIC move from being an organization that I think in essence, the best way to describe it, has straddled the intelligence space and the law enforcement space, having dual purpose, which is a complexity that makes our operations quite difficult. The current legislation doesn't allow us to use our current powers and authorities in a manner that is really differentiates us from a law enforcement organization. And obviously there are already 9 highly functioning and competent law enforcement agencies across the organization. So the review essentially clarifies the ACIC's role, places it squarely as a criminal intelligence agency, and the new legislation provides us with a legislative framework and basis to be able to operate as such, and that includes using our powers and authorities for intelligence purposes rather than law enforcement purposes, better enabling our ability to share intelligence with stakeholders and partners who need it, and providing robust mechanisms to authorize, like a warrant regime to authorize the use of our powers, more commensurate and akin to other intelligence agencies that operate under the national intelligence community. So we're delighted with the clarity that this provides. We are very satisfied with the degree to which we've been able to inform and help shape that new piece of legislation, and we look forward to it being introduced and hopefully passed through Parliament.
So this would have this has come about because of the complexity, and I think in your opening statement you referred to, or Mr. Ribbon did, in relation to how much money is generated through organised crime that could be used in a more positive and proactive way for Australians. So it's good to see that work is being done. And Mr. Abdul, when he was asking about cybercrime, we actually did visit the centre, the AFP Centre in Sydney last week, and obviously you've been involved in one of the case studies. They briefed us in relation to those amazing opportunities that the criminal world come up with, and it always disappoints us as committee members that, you know, the bad guys are so well funded, they have all the latest equipment, but we heard how the agencies are working together, and one of the young AFP officers had just done some training with an international partner, was able to actually retrieve a lot of that information from the computers and the phones in a very short period of time. So that work and that change in legislation has been brought about because of this activity. There are no longer any borders, and we need to be able to share information a lot more than ever before. But I was wondering if there's anything else. I know we've touched on the National Criminal Intelligence System, but is there anything else that you can update the committee about the rollout of that?
Do you want me to start, and then perhaps I'll throw to Ms. Madden? Thank you, Chair. We're really proud of where we're at with the National Criminal Intelligence System. It's been, we acknowledge it's been a long time coming, but such a complex system, having to wrestle with the challenges of federation and a range of different state and territory systems across the country, has been overcome to the point where we have every state and territory policing agency now provisioning to NSIS except for the Northern Territory, and they are working extremely hard to get themselves connected. You'd be really pleased to hear, Chair, that Tasmania really put the foot on the pedal in the last 12 or so months. I'm not sure what sort of influence you had there, but
well, I think just the activity of crime in the state that wasn't there 20 years ago, we're there on every element, unfortunately.
So we have the Northern Territory still to connect and provision. Importantly, though, that doesn't mean that they can't access NSIS and consume from the National Criminal Intelligence System. So every partner agency can consume. Most are provisioning, but we still have the Northern Territory and aspects of the Australian Federal Police still to connect, but they are working extremely hard to make sure that any data quality issues that they might have in connecting to the system are overcome before they provision, so they don't affect the rest of the system. So incredible progress there. I might throw to Ms. Madden to perhaps talk about what's next with the National Criminal Intelligence System, because it's not about celebrating where we're at and forgetting about it. It's about evolving the system into its next steps, particularly noting the need for us and the expectation from you and the expectation from the community that we're sharing intelligence at scale.
Thank you. So as we're giving focus to completing that national picture of operational policing data, we're in parallel working on intelligence data, so putting the eye into NSIS. Our work at the moment has included a pilot of piping the ACID data, the Australian Criminal Intelligence Database material, through to the NSIS system. That pilot has allowed the ACID data to be available to a cohort of ACIC users, just as a first port of call. We intend to open up that ACID data to more broadly the NSIS user base in our version 12 release, which is on schedule for May this year. We are also working with our police partner agencies for them to pipe intelligence data directly from their systems into NSIS. So that eventually we will be able to decommission the very dated ACID system So that work is underway in our Tranche 2 funding envelope, which will run through until June 2027. In parallel, we've got some upgrades to the NSIS platform underway, so under the hood type capability around extensibility, security and performance of the NSIS platform, and that will take us through till June 2027. Thanks.
Great,
I
thank
think
you.
it's important to add too that, as you're probably aware and as we've stated before, that the National Firearm Register will ultimately be housed on the National Criminal Intelligence System platform as well. And indeed, the Australian Firearm Information Network, AFIN, is already embedded in the NSIS system. So it's a multi-purpose system that is increasingly relied on by our partners.
Thank you for that. You outlined earlier to my question about the officers that you have working. How's recruitment and retention? Are the figures of retention, have they improved? And with the work that you do, I would imagine recruitment would be always something that you're looking for, but there would be a lot of interest, I would have thought.
Yeah. I'll hand to Dr. Barrett in a moment, but I'm happy to say that our attrition rates have certainly improved in the last several years, and that we do appear to be attracting a high caliber and certainly high quantity of interests and applicants to our recruitment processes. But I'll hand over to Dr. Barrett to talk through maybe just some stats about where we're up to.
Absolutely. So as of 1 December 2025, we had a rolling 12-month attrition of 10.7%, which has reduced from 18.8% at the same time in 2024. So a significant improvement in our attrition rates in the course of that year. In terms of retention initiatives and workforce support, what I would say is we are very focused on our graduate program, particularly into the future, and ensuring that we're bringing in graduates who can fulfil our intelligence mission, so that analyst cohort. And our graduates get to do 3 rotations throughout the organisation. So it's about them seeing, the vast array of things that we have on offer, so they understand that they're not choosing one career. They can actually have a great diversity of careers within the ACIC itself, so that hopefully they are keen to stay and to learn different things, and we can grow them in-house.
And do you actually bring in officers from other organisations, and like the AFP, do they do a rotation through?
Well, we certainly have secondment arrangements where it makes sense to do so. We have embedded units such as Austrac has an embedded financial intelligence unit that works in a totally seamless way with us as well. We manage the Fraud Fusion Centre, which is a collection of relevant agencies looking at fraud against the NDIS program and a range of other government-funded programs. So we certainly bring people in, but in terms of our ability, like on a more permanent basis, we attract a lot of applicants from police forces around the country, including the AFP and other Commonwealth and jurisdictional law enforcement and national security agencies, and certainly from the national intelligence community. We receive a lot of new recruits into a variety of our positions, and that cross-pollination is a very good thing. In the same way that we're happy when an ACIC officer leaves us to go work for a partner agency, that sort of sharing of knowledge and an embedding of experience just enriches the national security community. So it's a very positive and healthy thing to see.
In relation to the changes, the Independent National Security Legislation Monitor, can you explain to the committee what impact that's having and what changes ACIC are going to experience?
Is that the INSLM?
Yes.
INSLM. So the most recent inquiry into the use of SLADE powers is the most recent report. Yes, the outcome of that, I believe, was the INSLM formed the view that in terms of the SLADE powers which were provided to the ACIC and the AFP for data disruption warrants, account takeover warrants, and network activity warrants, those are the three provisions, that he formed the view that the ACIC as a predominantly intelligence agency should maintain access to the network activity warrants and to the account takeover warrants, but that data disruption was more akin to a law enforcement function. So again, I paraphrase the Mr. Blake, but that's in essence what the prime difference was. The government, I think, is yet to consider that. I don't believe the government has issued a report on that, so is considering that function. But I would draw the committee's attention to your earlier question around the reform of the ACIC's role and function and the new legislation that is being developed, that I'm confident that that new legislation will afford the ACIC all the appropriate powers and authorities to fulfil its mandate.
So can you update us to whether there's any changes to the broader electronic surveillance reforms and when that's at?
Yeah, so that work is still underway. So we, along with the other agencies that operate under the ESR frameworks or legislative elements of that, are working to inform that work. But I believe that that's not being led by us; it's being led by the Home Affairs Department. But we're certainly informing that work as it goes forward.
Any other committee members?
I had a few questions.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I was late. Chair, please, if these have been covered already, just let me know and I'll look at the Hansard. I just had some questions about the mutual recognition of negative working with children checks, the National Firearms Register and the National Police Checking Service. We've covered all of them?
Well, we have. We have, unless you've got something that relates to them. But
if we've covered all of them, I'll look at the Hansard then, Chair.
Unless there's anything else anyone wants to add.
Unless there's a specific question,
you covered the timelines and whatnot? Okay.
Yeah.
No, then I don't have anything to...
I'm happy to take anything.
Yeah, if there's anything on notice, we can...
Sure, okay, I'll look at the Hansard, thank you.
Well, thus far you haven't taken anything on notice, which is good, which is great. But look, I just wanted to, on behalf of the committee, just thank you and to pass on to your officers that the work that you do is incredibly important to the Australian community and it's appreciated. And thank you for what you do and for giving your time today. I look forward to our visit as soon as we can get a date that now is available in everyone's diaries. But yeah, thank you very much. And we stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.